Everyone, and yeah, look, thank you so much for joining us today. As a quick introduction, my name's Jess Findlay and I am the Head of Customer Success here at Beam. I've been involved with Magic Notes and really the software side of Beam since the very beginning, working with some of our earliest partners on the first pilots and rollouts of the tool. And today I oversee our work across all of our customer groups. I work particularly closely with the team that leads our work in the employability space, which is led by my wonderful colleague Pippa, who I know Rich works closely with, and lots of you may have met previously. So in terms of what we have lined up for today's session, you can see our faces on the screen, so it's a bit of a giveaway. But I'm just going to give a quick recap of the agenda. And I think we've got a really great lineup. We're going to start by hearing from Naomi Clayton, who we have here, who's the CEO of the Institute for Employment Studies, who will be helping us set the scene by sharing her perspective on the current employability landscape. After that, I'll give a quick introduction to Beam's tools and why we created them, and walk you through a demo of Magic Notes, which is our AI summarization tool. And following that, we will hear from Rich Massey, who is the Head of Continuous Improvement at AKG, who's going to share their experience of using AI in practice. And then finally, we will leave some time at the end for Q&A and a bit of a discussion if there is time. And yeah, as I mentioned earlier, please do pop any questions into the Q&A function on Teams as we go, and we'll come back to those at the end. Okay, so to kick us off then, I'm really happy to bring on Naomi, who, as I mentioned, is going to set the scene for us. And I've got a couple of questions to help guide that for you, Naomi. So as a starting point, do you want to properly introduce yourself and IEP for everyone?
Hi, thank you. Yes, I'm Naomi Clayton. I'm Chief Executive of IES, the Institute for Employment Studies. For those of you who don't know IES, we are a not-for-profit research organisation, and we focus on employment, labour market, workforce issues. We've got a big public policy team and a team that focus on employer practice, workforce issues. So we spend a lot of time looking at what's going on in the labour market. We work very closely with employment support providers, partly as part of the REACT partnership, but we also do a lot of work to understand what works to respond to some of the labour market challenges, and to evaluate different programmes to look at what works and what effective practice looks like.
Brilliant, and I think very relevant content for what everyone is here for today. And yeah, firstly, apologies, I do have Institute for Employment Studies written down in my notes and on your screen, and somehow I managed to do a typo of a P to an S, so you'll excuse me. I think what I was really interested to hear about next was any of the sort of biggest pressure points that IES fellows are seeing across delivery of employment services.
Yeah, so I mean, as I mentioned, we work quite closely with employment support providers and employability professionals, and I think there are several challenges at the moment. There's a lot of change, with the Labour government have brought in a number of different reforms, but also we're at a point in time where we're facing quite significant labour market challenges. We're seeing unemployment rise. It's currently at a 5-year high. We've seen a real slowdown in employers hiring, and so employability professionals are operating in quite a challenging environment in terms of the changes that are being kind of brought in, and also some of the trends that we're seeing in the labour market. So I think in general, a lot of employability professionals are working with customers, clients that are have basically multiple interlinked barriers. So we've seen a really significant rise in long-term ill health. So a lot of people, whether they're in the labour market or outside the labour market, have quite often multiple long-term health challenges, and we currently have 2.8 million people who are outside of the labour market due to ill health. But whilst we've got a lot of people with long-term health conditions, there's rarely ever one thing going on with any one individual. People quite often face multiple barriers to work. So, providers, employability professionals, are working with people who often face kind of multiple interlinked barriers, and trying to address all of those challenges and provide that real kind of holistic, tailored support at the same time as dealing with kind of performance-driven targets, contractual requirements, and trying to support people into work and closer to work at a time where we're seeing quite significant change in the labour market too. So obviously in the shorter term, we've seen a rise in unemployment, slowdown in hiring from employers. The labour market is continuing to undergo quite significant change driven.
Oh, Naomi's just frozen for me there. I don't know if she's frozen.
Looking at things like technological change and AI. You can still hear me?
Yes, you're just back.
Yeah, perfect. So the impacts of technology and AI is changing demand for different roles and the skills required. We're seeing the kind of transition to net zero, the impacts of kind of hybrid and remote working. There are some big trends that are impacting on the world of work, and that's changing the kind of job opportunities available and the skills that people need for work too. So, that's the environment that professionals are operating within. There's also the system challenges, I would say, and I think it's widely recognised at this point that advisors are and have been for a long time having to operate in quite fragmented, complex systems. When you look at the kind of employment and skills system and how that operates. So, we tend to have multiple different programs and initiatives, and they quite often operate in silos, and quite often, employment is not necessarily joined up with skills or housing or transport, the whole range of different areas that impact on people's employment opportunities. And so, advisors are having to operate within those systems, and that kind of fragmentation can affect referral pathways. The system is difficult for individuals and employers to navigate, but it's also really difficult quite often for providers to navigate. And then I think there's just the general kind of workforce capacity pressures that come with the role, which partly links to all of what I was saying in terms of the environment in which people are having to operate in. But quite often, people are required to do that kind of continuous upskilling to keep pace with changes in technology, those kind of labour market shifts, safeguarding expectations, whilst kind of dealing with kind of everything else that the job demands. And of course, haven't really touched on the employer engagement as well as working with individuals. Advisors also need to work with employers to support people into roles and kind of broker those opportunities. So I think there's lots of different pressures, and advisors are constantly dealing with quite high workloads and multiple challenges.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I can see Rich nodding, and I'm sure lots of people on this call can really relate to everything you've referenced there. I think you've touched on the really complex environment and systems sort of being used. And then on top of that, where tech comes into all of this and the advancements in technology and how the space keeps up. I think as you've referenced as well, and what we're here to talk about really is AI, and AI is an increasingly important digital skill for job seekers. And I'd love to get your perspective on, how can employment providers leverage AI in a way that ensures it remains a tool for inclusion rather than exclusion or a technology advancement that sort of leaves people behind?
Yeah, there are several things here, and I think there's the general challenges around AI adoption, kind of within providers, thinking about kind of workforce and employee engagement challenges. But in terms of making sure that AI kind of is a tool for inclusion, I think there's probably several things here. One being, I think it's important to make sure that AI is never the only route and the only tool available for people, both thinking about, advisors themselves, but also individuals and what works for different individuals. And I think, as long as you have that choice, I think that helps to kind of maintain trust amongst the workforce, but also among participants too. I also think, and we see this all the time in research, but I think it's really important to be explicit about consent as well, and being really clear about where AI is being used, how it's being used, what it means in terms of people's data, and making sure that it is kind of optional. So, being really clear and upfront, I think, around how AI is being used. I think it can be very helpful, and we've seen numerous examples of how AI can be used for kind of live translation, and kind of obviously kind of aiding kind of note taking, which really can help to improve engagement of specific participants, particularly those with kind of ESOL needs, for instance. But I think linked to that is looking at what works for different groups and making sure that it's not a kind of one size fits all approach. And particularly when it comes to things like neurodiversity, that the use of AI isn't kind of disadvantaging anybody, but actually does work for different groups. And I think, particularly for neurodiverse people who may have particular communication preferences, I think it's really important to think about how AI is being used and how it can be used for the benefit of different groups and individuals too. And then I think I've touched on the kind of workforce side, but I think it's absolutely critical to kind of introduce AI and roll out AI in a way that brings people with you and staff with you. So what's absolutely critical there is the investment in employee engagement, in staff training, and making sure that advisors kind of really kind of understand AI, its potential, but also its limitations.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've touched on so many important points there that I would love to dive into all in much more detail. But I think one key question, or one sort of final question I'd like to ask you off the back of that, is if you were going to give one piece of advice to sort of organizations that we have on this call, if they were going to implement AI, on how to bring the workforce on that journey really effectively and make sure they embrace it, but embrace it appropriately, what would that sort of advice be?
I think it would I think it would come back to the point around employee engagement, because I think it's really important for organisations to make sure that staff are able to kind of voice any concerns that they might have about AI, that they feel those concerns are being heard, and that you know, organisations are working with teams to look at how AI can be best utilised and adopted, and what that means for kind of job design, for different processes. I think it's just really, really important to do these things with teams, and in a way that really kind of engages staff and brings staff on that journey, basically.
Yeah, no, completely agree. It's one thing to provide a tool, but it's only going to have impact if you really drive that culture change, bring staff on the journey, and ensure that they're clear on how they should use that tool to deliver the impacts that it needs to have for themselves as individuals, for the people they support, and for the wider organization. Look, Naomi, thank you so much for that. That was like incredibly helpful, and I found all your insights just super interesting. And I think that ties on really nicely to what we're going to talk about next. So yeah, as Naomi's highlighted, the employability space is facing some very real pressures at the moment, and coping with the change in recent reforms, rises in unemployment, and the interlinked barriers faced by those being supported. And I think a combination of all of these challenges really speaks to why we created Magic Notes in the first place. And I'd like to just give a really quick overview as to that journey and how it's got us to where we are just now. And I think our goal in this space was very simple, which was to make job seeking support more effective, but also at the same time more human. So, sorry, I forgot I had some builds built in here that I'm going to have to click through. A quick bit of history on how the tool came about then. So we originally built Magic Notes as an internal tool for our own caseworkers at Beam. So at Beam, we have a team of around 100 caseworkers. As alongside building technology, we also deliver frontline support directly, including helping people overcome barriers to move into employment. And through that, we've supported over 2,000 people into work through our own team. And look, our caseworkers are absolutely brilliant at what they do. They're incredible coaches who build meaningful relationships with the people they support and help them find that sustainable and meaningful employment. But despite that, we definitely found there was a big challenge, which was mainly linked to the sheer amount of paperwork that came with the role and how overwhelming that was for our team. They were spending huge amounts of time writing assessment reports, case notes, documentation, and many of them felt like they were spending more time writing about the work than actually doing it. And on top of that, from a management perspective, we also saw challenges around case notes being written in a timely manner, documentation being consistent, and really maintaining a clear record of all of the brilliant work that was being done. And in short, that is why we built Magic Notes in the first place. So I imagine many of you on this call know, but Magic Notes is a tool that uses AI to take care of note-taking and documentation in seconds. It's incredibly simple to use. You simply record a conversation, whether that's a support session, a meeting, an assessment, either on your phone, which can just sit by you on the table, or on your desktop. And you have that conversation, that interaction, that meeting as normal, whilst Magic Notes works away in the background and then generates a clear, structured, well-written summary of that conversation. Then really quickly, that summary can be copied directly into whatever system your team uses to store that documentation. And then in seconds, rather than in days or sometimes weeks, you've gone from that interaction happening to the notes being logged to the actions being actioned, which is the critical next step that happens after all of this. Now, rather than me explaining this, it's way better to understand what I'm going on about by seeing this in action. And I believe for this purpose, we are going to do a live demo, and that Rich, you have volunteered to take part in said demo with me.
I have.
Wonderful. Thank you for being a very brave volunteer. So I'm just going to change my screen quickly and take you onto Magic Notes. And Rich and I are going to role play an employability style conversation. It's going to be a very short demo that's only 2 to 3 minutes and obviously will not reflect nearly as much detail as the sort of realities of the space. But Rich, if you're happy with it, I'll be the advisor and you could be someone who is looking for work.
Great.
Brilliant. So let me just share my screen for a second and I will get started. So what you'll see here is my Magic Notes homepage, and I'm just going to click record and tell it that I am currently online and record my session. So I'm just going to pause there so that Rich, just to check everyone can see the recording screen, which is in action.
Yep.
Fab. So Rich, the only thing that needs to happen at the beginning is that I'll introduce myself and you'll introduce yourself, so Magic Notes knows whose is who. Does that sound okay?
Sounds good.
Perfect. In which case I'm going to resume the recording. So hi there, Rich. My name is Jess and I'm an employment advisor. I believe you've come in for a meeting today. Could you give me a quick introduction?
Yep, I'm Richard and I'm a job seeker looking for work.
Fantastic. So Richard, can I ask what sort of job that you are looking for at the moment?
So I've always worked in retail, but I'd really like to branch out and do customer service somewhere else, in a different sector.
Okay, fantastic. And could you tell me a little bit more about your past experience?
So I'm passionate about customer service. I really enjoy being with large groups of people. I like large teams, with lots of people. I like to be busy all the time. I don't like to be bored, so I really don't want to be put somewhere where it's really quiet. I basically love talking to people.
Fantastic. I mean, it sounds like lots of different skills there that we can use to find you a job that's going to be really well fitted. Could you let me know when you were last working? When was that and what type of job was that?
So my last job was in a small shop, but a really busy one in the high street in the town where I live. And I fell out of work around about 3 months ago.
Okay, so it's been 3 months that you've been out of work. And can I just check, do you have an up-to-date CV?
I do, but I'd love someone to give me a bit of support with it because I'm not entirely sure how good it is for the jobs that I want to go into.
Yeah, no problem at all. That is absolutely something that we can look at together. And can I also check if you have any qualifications that would be useful for me to know about?
I have my A levels, but I don't have anything since then.
Not a problem at all. And final question, when you've been looking for jobs recently, is there anything you've been struggling with in particular?
I think it's just the confidence because I've been in a job for so long. I think it's just the confidence of actually thinking where next, what to do. And I really want some more sociable hours. So I don't really want to be working Monday to Sunday anymore on a 5-day rotation. So it's about trying to bridge that gap, trying to understand how I can get into a more, let's just say, a more sociable pattern of work.
Absolutely. They're already good things to know that we can absolutely pick up on as we kick off your job searching journey together. So we're going to set up a follow-up meeting, and ahead of that, could you just make sure to send over your CV to me so that I can have a look and perhaps find a local job board and have a look at some jobs that might be of interest that we can then work through together. Does that sound okay?
I'll start doing that. That's great.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Richard.
No worries.
And I'm just going to hit save there. And what is going to happen is Magic Notes is going to do the work in the background to summarize everything that was discussed, and I'll run you through what that looks like. First of all, a big round of applause and thank you to Richard for taking part in that demo. I know it's hard when you're on the spot. I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm not an employment specialist. So, and you're probably all quite glad I'm not, because you'd probably be like, that was a bit of a useless meeting. But the idea here is to demonstrate the tool and how it works, rather than any specialism I have in the space. So what's happened now in the background is Magic Notes has already generated an initial summary of that conversation. So I'm just going to share my screen again and show you what that looks like in an initial format, and then the other different ways that we could structure the summary. Just give a second. Yeah. So what you can hopefully see here is that we have a summary of the conversation that has been structured as an employment support action plan from the initial appointment that we had, listing the 2 attendees, myself, the employment advisor, and Richard as a participant. We've got a bit of an introduction, but then most interestingly, it's got a summary of the entire appointment. So everything that we discussed together, your preferences around working in large, busy teams that we've got here, your passion for customer service, and the qualifications that you have. It touches on the confidence barriers you mentioned and the actions that we touched on. It then goes into the relevant sections below, breaking down the different goals, the barriers, and actions that were discussed, with a very specific action plan down at the bottom. I think from my understanding of working with partners like yourself in the sector, it's those actionable points that are particularly key, and making sure that we're not just having conversations, but we've got clear actions logged on as to how the person can move forward. So one example that I can show you just to take this one step further is this function we've got at the side, which is called knowledge base, which can be pre-populated with organizational specific, sector specific information that your staff could then use to engage with to get further insights or recommendations. In this example, I could say, is there a local CV workshop for Richard? And really quickly, just doing a bit of thinking. And we're going to assume you live in Hounslow for the purposes of this. And if you do, it's suggested relevant local services that I could mention in my follow-up to you to say, as well as looking at the job board, perhaps you could look at booking into a CV workshop with one of these, as you had asked for some support in tailoring that CV. There's loads of different things you can do with this, and it's all about the ways in which you customize it for your organization. But yeah, just come down to the very bottom. We've already got those actions logged. So things like you to send in your CV, to look at those job boards, and for us to book in that follow-up section. But it does notice that I didn't book that. So that's a really good reminder to me that I should be booking in the session. One final quick thing I'll show you before I promise we will move on is just in the way in which we can really quickly restructure this depending on the action or the output that the advisor needs. So for example, I could quickly turn this into a skills-based CV. So all I do is click on a different format, and Magic Notes will really quickly work up an initial CV based on the guidance that we have given it for what this should look like. So describing you as a dedicated customer service professional with extensive experience in retail, passionate about engaging with people and working in busy, dynamic team environments, breaking down your key skills, education, and interests. Obviously, this is just a starting point, but it's a really quick way to turn what was discussed in that conversation into actionable items that could be used on the CV. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for now and move back to the slides because I'm conscious of time. Look, now hopefully you can see from that very quick demo of the tool that you can see the impacts that employment advisors could gather from working with a tool like this. And we've worked so far with thousands of professionals using this tool, and it's used every day across the UK by teams just like yours. And I think one of the reasons we've been able to scale so quickly is because of the really consistent feedback we have had. We're now partnering with over 200 frontline organisations globally, including AKG, who you'll hear from shortly, through Rich. And we also work with a number of organisations many of you will recognise, including Reed, Hestia, as well as being the partner of choice for the majority of UK local authorities, trusts, charities and care providers. And as I mentioned, the reason we have managed to scale this much is because the benefits are so clear. The staff don't just save time, We also see a real improved quality and consistency of documentation, improved quality of support for clients, more time to support clients into securing a job, and then greater job satisfaction for staff on top of that. Now, today I've really focused on Magic Notes as our sort of initial tool to show you, but we've actually developed a suite of AI tools that have been co-designed with our partners to tackle the other challenges being faced by the sector. Now, I'm not going to walk through these products in detail, but what I want to sort of introduce to you is a suite of products that can be used flexibly and interchangeably to increase efficiency, improve practice, and drive outcomes by supporting with everything from CV creation to interview practice to live interpretation for non-English speaking clients. We have demos available for all of these tools, so if you are interested in seeing or hearing more afterwards, please do reach out and we'll be very happy to book in some time to walk you through them. Now, as a reminder as well, we do have the Q&A box, so if any questions pop up about any of this as we go, you're very, very welcome to just pop them in the chat and we will come back to them. Now, conscious of time and aware I feel like I have been talking for slightly too long, so I think this feels like a really good time to move on and hear directly from someone who is actually using these tools in practice. So yeah, would love to bring back the star of our demo, Rich Massey from AKG, who is going to share more about their journey using Magic Notes, how we've worked together on the co-development of new tools, and how they are thinking about deploying them most effectively within their organisation. So Rich, ready to come
Hello.
back up?
Indeed.
Brilliant. So, I mean, first of all, could you give us a bit of an introduction to AKG and your role there?
Yeah, so talking of AKG, so we offer not just employability services, we offer health coach services, we offer learning and tutoring around many NVQs as well with our AKG Learning. So we're AKG Learning, AKG Health, AKG Employment, and Intuitive Thinking skills that give really, really comprehensive help to people who need it with mental health challenges, also around addiction challenges as well. So we're really, really broad set. We've been working on the Restart scheme since 2021, and it is a fantastic scheme to be on, and changing people's lives and getting them into work is incredible. But also it comes with challenges as well. And those challenges I'll touch on in a minute.
Brilliant. I mean, you're definitely doing lots at AKG and there's no one simple problem to solve. But yeah, we'd love for you to share with everyone a bit more about your journey with Magic Notes today and maybe the specific problem you've been trying to solve there.
I appreciate as well, I said what AKG do and I didn't say what I do. So effectively, I'm head of continuous improvement. So I'll start off there and I'll merge into what we're talking about. So my job is not just around technology, but looking at culture. But my focus and my passion is around our people and our people delivering to participants, to clients, to learners. So that's where my challenge has been around in 3 or 4 different businesses over the last 15 years. Really over the last 2 years, we've taken a step back as a technology team. I work in the IT team within AKG UK as central services, and asked ourselves, where could we help the business improve, enable them better? So our focus has been around, as I said, enabling within the Restart team, enabling employment coaches, health coaches, tutors, stripping away unnecessary layers to their jobs and making sure that they're focused, laser focused on what they're there to do, which is serve our participants, serve our learners, serve our clients, and create a space and enable a space for better support. So that's really the goal was never tools. And I'll talk about AI a lot today, but actually we never start with the tools. We start with what is the problem, because sometimes some of those problems can be fixed by slightly tinkering with a process or changing something or making something easier. What we are seeing on the ground, and it touches on what Naomi said, was we're doing several pieces of work in parallel. At the moment, we're looking at automation initiatives, we're looking at AI, we're looking at tools. But all of that stuff, when we've done individual projects, has pointed towards the same kind of reality. And I would say that reality is the administration burden and the amount of administration and what I class as digital motion, having to skip from one screen to another screen to doing this, doing that over here, sending a CV, finding a job, that creates the biggest barrier to supporting our participants whilst you're trying to actually support participants by doing that administration. There is also a lot of administration that comes with CSS and compliance standards within employment. Anyone from the employment industry is probably going, yeah, duh, we know that. We're absolutely 100% aware of that. It wasn't happening in isolation, though, administration. There are fewer opportunities. There is a struggling labour market at the moment. It's complex. There's interlinked barriers between employment and health, especially, and we're seeing a massive change between there with health to skills back to employment as well. And I feel like that's the one thing that we're really getting and trying to get a grip of as well. And all within that, it's performance-driven contracts, it's fixed targets, and it's significant contractual obligations and administration requirements. So we saw key tensions there. Administration expectations are not reducing anytime soon, and we can either accept it or we can, we can try and fight against it. The acceptance is much, much simpler, and understanding what we can do in a better way, and something has to give. We've got to help our people be laser focused on what they're there to do, which is support people into employment. And most of that, and the value that we've seen when we've done time and motion studies, most of the value and the impact of what brings them towards employment is the conversation, the soft power, the talking, and is around those activities that they raise off the back of the talking and getting buy-in from participant. So whilst we're seeing a employment coach that's spending maybe a half an hour appointment and 10 minutes of that is flicking back and forward for screens to record notes, recording actions, we're actually finding that the biggest value that we're getting is the intervention and activity and conversation. So what we wanted to look for is tools that would release and reduce that burden, would create much more better language conversation, natural language conversations. And that's why we looked for transcription and summarization tools. And that's why we started talking to Beam. So effectively, we got a really good feeling about Beam, the team, the passion that they have, and the experience that they had as well, starting off as a provider of services rather than just a technology provider, meant that we knew we weren't going to get something very corporate-y with a lack of impact. And we were really looking on, can we reduce administration to provide better conversations, but there has to be impact. It's not just providing 5 minutes, it's about where that 5 minutes is spent. And that's where all of our success measures have been driven around. So that was the world before Magic Notes and our pilot. We started with the pilot and we thought very carefully about where we were going to pilot it last year. And AKG Health definitely have the biggest administration burden. They definitely record the biggest amount of administration whilst making sure that they're dealing with participants who are neurodiverse, participants who have mental health and physical health challenges, and generally what they offer is a health coaching service. So we put it into the AKG Health team. We run it for 6 weeks. And at the end of that 6 weeks, we had some really key success measures, which were all about administration, lower cognitive burden for our staff, and making sure that our participants felt that they were receiving a better service. So we did a little bit of before and after, a little bit of control groups, things like that before we started. The 3 things that came out of it was the standardization and the quality of the documentation was improved by a lot. So we're talking about 2.5 times better. And it also recorded no poor documentation going back to employment coaches. And to give you an understanding, those exit summaries go back to employment coaches so they understand off the back of those health coaching sessions what needs to be adapted, what needs to be strengthened, and what they need to do more to help them into employment. So it's a really key piece of documentation that goes between the two. So both employment coaches were happier with the exit summaries they were receiving. We were seeing a better quality. All health coaches said they felt like they had slightly lower cognitive load, and also they were saving between 4 and 6 minutes on every single participant appointment. The biggest thing that I thought was really, really key here, though, they were saying that they were noticing things that they'd never noticed before in things people were saying, in things people were doing. that was the real key insight for me. So effectively off the back of that and a similar pilot with AKG Learning, we decided to partner with Beam. Some of that was because of Magic Notes, and we knew it would work within our business, but some of that was around the roadmap as well. So effectively looking at Interpret, Language Line, who we use as a partner at the moment, there was inconsistencies around translation, there was a struggle around booking, and also on top of that, it's a very, very high cost for each hour of translation. So we've, as it shows in that slide there, we've looked at Magic Notes and Interpret for our joint rollout to AKG Employment. We're strengthening where we're using Magic Notes and rolling that out in a much wider way for AKG Learning. AKG Health are going to get the Interpret tool once we've been through the pilot, and Intuitive Thinking Skills are using it for their Connect to Work programs. For Magic Notes, are using it on their vocational profiling. So that's effectively what we did next. So that's it, really. That's the data told us that this was a tool that was going to strengthen the thing that we needed to strengthen. And effectively, we're starting to now, we've signed the contract and we've started to now roll that out amongst our colleagues over the whole AKG group. Is there anything else you needed to know, Jess, or is there anything else anyone else needed to know?
You preempted most of my questions. That was so perfectly structured and really insightful. And I think what you've touched on there is something I think about a lot, which is this really interesting tension where the highest quality work from staff, it's always that face-to-face interaction. It's where the impact really comes from. And especially if they're not worrying about note-taking, that the quality of that interaction is so increased. But the documentation is also critical. You can't just say, don't worry about it. And yeah, if we can get to a system where the documentation is improved and they're able to focus on that higher quality way of work, that feels like the big win. And it's very exciting to be working with you, to feel like we're starting to move in that direction and really see those impacts with staff. I think.
And the last thing on that, Jess, is that the quality, again, the so what about the documentation is not just we need to hit a standard for our compliance. Of course, that's important, but it's what does that tell me next time that I come into an appointment? What information does that give someone who maybe takes over an appointment with a participant when you're off sick? And the quality that standing in employment coach could give in your place in comparison to what physically you could write and remember. And that's the key thing. People aren't really remembering all the great service that they're actually doing last time and the key actions that they need to do next time, because there's just too much to take in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think what's really exciting about the way that we're working together is that it is very innovative. You know, you're trialing Interpret at the moment, but even from things you're saying already, I'm already thinking of other ideas of how we can maybe move forward together and think about trialing new products, new solutions in different ways. And that's the way we really like to work. And I think there's so much opportunity to use AI in different applications in this space to really meaningfully deliver those impacts. My final question was, if another provider came to you tomorrow asking for advice about trialing, embedding, rolling out AI, what would you tell them?
I think I'd probably ask back with a question and say, what's the problem you're looking to solve here? And what's the impact you're looking to drive? And when we're talking about AI, we need to think about it as multi-layered. So effectively, it's around what is the right solution for you, and how AI can help with that. And I think there's so many ways that AI can help, but it really starts with the problem, and it starts with what are you trying to achieve? From there, what would the solution look to be like? As I said, we came to you very clearly because we wanted a particular type of product to take these particular pressures away, and then go from there, but make sure it starts with what is the problem you're trying to solve? What's the solution you want to look like? But actually, you already need to know what your success measures are before you start out here, because otherwise you can change those, you can flex things as you go through, but realistically, you need to know what you're looking to solve.
Now, I couldn't agree with you more on that. And that's honestly absolutely what we want as well. Like we're here to try and help you solve these problems. And for us, it's one thing to get, partners using our tools, even using it very broadly and very regularly. But if you don't have a clear sense of what that problem is you want to solve, how can we possibly track if we've delivered the impact that you need? And we could get to the end of a year and be like, oh, well, we didn't actually know what we were trying to do. We were just doing. And I think being really intentional about how you approach this with a really clear targets is super key. And that's, yeah, absolutely the way we like to work as well. So I think that's a really good piece of advice. Brilliant. Well, look, thank you so much, Rich. As I said, I found that so insightful. I'm sure everyone else did. And it links us nicely on into our Q&A, as I'm certain there's going to be a few questions that have been triggered by everything you've shared and your experience. I will give you a slight break from the mic though, because you've just been sharing so generously, and I'll handle one or two questions that seem to be specifically for Beam that have come up in the chat. One of those is around integrations, which is something that we get asked about a lot. So I think it is Luke has asked, can Magic Notes integrate into a CRM such as Dynamics or Salesforce? And in short, yes, Magic Notes can, and we are very up for building integrations with those systems. I think the challenge is sometimes will the CRM system be up for doing a two-way integration, which can sometimes be the blocker that stops us getting going. But we're currently working on a lot of different creative ways around that, ways we can approach integrations. And it's kind of an active piece of work we're doing with certain partners. So yeah, if you want to start trialing this tool and using an integration, we can absolutely explore that. What I'd say, on the other hand, is we get asked about integration a lot before partners start using Magic Notes. And once they start using it, even sitting outside the CRM, they realize that copy and paste into the CRM is, yes, a quick and efficient process, but it's also that moment and trigger to have a human in the loop to make sure we're really engaging with, reading and checking the notes that have been produced by Magic Notes before they're copied over. And look, whatever integrations we do set up, we'd make sure we have those sort of safeguards built in as well. But generally, once people get going, the copy and paste isn't really a huge blocker. And we've had, yeah, loads of success with lots of partners at scale sticking with that sort of use of Magic Notes outside of their core system. But yeah, it's a very active conversation, and we're always happy to explore the integration point. We've got another question from Sammy, who's asked, does Magic Notes automatically translate into English, or do you have to select an option? Which is an easy answer, because yes, it does. And I've seen some examples of partners very recently where they operate somewhere where there's a really commonly spoken second language, like Spanish. And I've seen instances where the entire interaction is recorded in Spanish, but then that can be summarized in English for the worker to really quickly have the English translated version stored straight into their documentation system as needed. So that can both work if both parties are speaking the same language, or if there's two languages being spoken and an interpreter present. What you can then also do is, let's say you have done an interview or a conversation with someone, the notes have been summarized in English, but you spoke to them in another language. You could actually send them a follow-up in both English and get Magic Notes to translate that follow-up into their spoken language for you, to make it much, much easier to have those multilingual interactions and to support an increasingly diverse client base that I'm sure you all have. And I think we've recently had our language capabilities verified and came through as like 98% accuracy, which is, I believe, higher than what is commonly seen in human interpretation as well. I am going to move back to a question for Naomi, actually. So a question we had through was, how have the AI tools impacted participants? Actually, this could be one for Rich. Sorry, it's noted down for Naomi, but I think it could probably go to you, Rich. How have the AI tools impacted participants' engagement and outcomes, particularly for those with complex barriers or multiple support needs? I think it touches on the points you were making about multiple support needs, Naomi, but also for you as a provider directly, Rich.
Yeah, so from my point of view, what it's from the pilots we've done, it's the ability to engage was what we tested, because the outcomes weren't really there for the pilot, if I'm being completely honest with you. But what we noticed is an increase in health coaching return visits. So we do 4 or 5, but actually the engagement rates of 3, 4, and 5 were 10 to 15% higher after using Magic Notes from appointment 1, if that makes sense. So we've judged it on a slightly smaller basis, but outcomes of health and engagement on health was a lot stronger using Magic Notes.
Brilliant. And Naomi, anything you'd add there from your experience?
So, I mean, the work that we've done talking to providers around how they're using I think it kind of really emphasizes the points that Rich has been making around the contribution AI makes in terms of reducing the administrative burden. That feels like the moment the biggest kind of impact, and the fact that it's enabling advisors to spend more kind of time on that kind of face-to-face personalized engagement. And we know from all of our work, and kind of the evidence shows this consistently, is that kind of tailored personalized engagement is what makes the most difference in terms of improving outcomes for participants. And obviously, the more that AI can create that space, free up more time for kind of more kind of human relational conversations, that the better. But I think Rich has touched on this too, really, as kind of different tools are being adopted, as AI has been used in different ways, I think it's absolutely critical to track the impact that it's having, to understand the difference it's making, because, ultimately this is all about trying to deliver better outcomes for individuals. And so I think as we're rolling out different tools, different processes, trying to understand the difference it's making and how it's impacting individuals is absolutely critical.
Yeah, completely agree. That's very good answers from both of you. So thank you so much there. Naomi, I've got another one for yourself, which is from IES's research perspective. What do you see as the biggest opportunities for AI to transform employability services over the next 5 years? Big question.
The biggest opportunity, I guess I would continue on the same theme, really, in terms of the ability for AI to reduce that admin burden and create more space for focusing on providing kind of personalized support to individuals. And that's the sort of thing that AI can't replace, that kind of real kind of advisor led, kind of relational support, building those relationships, that trust with individuals. That all takes time, and quite often advisors really struggle to find enough time for that. So I think that feels like the big win here.
Absolutely. And I think from points that you've both said today as well, and I know Rich has touched on this, it's not always just time, it's headspace and emotional load, and not feeling, as you said, the mental burden up to here being reduced gives you that time to invest your energy and engagement as well. Yeah, Rich, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I just want to say that the time on the restart scheme on core appointments is about 15 to 18 hours. So that's not a lot of time, even if a participant engages fully with every single appointment, and there's no illness, whatever. So every single second counts. I agree with Naomi, though. I think that the most important thing is that my job's in enablement. It's not in fulfillment. You never want to see me as an employment coach. I wouldn't be very good at it. But my job's in enablement. It's giving people the tools that they need to do the job. AI for me at the moment doesn't feel like it's certainly not going to underplay anything that an employment coach does. What I'd love is an employment coach who could just talk, and at the end of it could just prompt, this is do you want to do this, that, the other? Great. And then they're moving on to the next one. And all of the spare time that they get on an appointment is spent doing value activities, looking at that recruitment piece, looking at employers, looking at the vacancy, the matching between vacancy, skills, aspiration, and how they feel and the barriers. More time we can spend on every single participant doing that. That's what Magic Notes will give us. It will give us the time. It's then to be fulfilled.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it's the same about wherever Magic Notes is being used in different sectors. It is absolutely never about replacing skilled professionals, whether it's employment advisors or social workers. It's really about how can we really focus those staff members on using the best of their human skills and expertise and have the time, ability, and headspace, honestly, to do that and do it to the extent they want to. I think that's what's really powerful is when you see feedback from staff being like, I'm doing the job that I wanted to do and I got into this to do, and I feel like my days are more rewarding because I'm engaging with people and I'm supporting them towards outcomes. And I think that is the really critical bit to help them do what they do best and they love most. I am conscious we are getting close to the end of time, and I've seen a question pop up in the chat that I can answer really quickly, which is around data protection, which is very critical. And as I'm sure you will realise, in all of the ways Magic Notes is applied, we are handling sensitive personal data. So data security is absolutely at the heart of everything we do. So you've asked what happens to any data? Is it stored within the Magic Note system? You know, thinking from a GDPR perspective. So yes, all data is stored within Magic Notes securely on our servers. We have ISO 27001, Cyber Essentials Plus, all the certifications that you would need really to handle and store sensitive data securely. But that data is obviously still owned by the organization. We are simply a processor under GDPR, which means that we come together on an agreed retention period. So if you want that data deleted from Magic Notes after 7 days, 7 weeks, a year, anything in between, longer, we will follow that instruction so that you are still in complete control of that data, and whatever needs to be transferred over to yourselves is. But yeah, it's all handled completely securely with only appropriate role-based access, etc. And we have a public trust centre that we can send on a link of, which has details on the way we approach privacy and security. A bit of a serious and dry note to end on, but an important one, I think. So look, that does bring us to the end of our Q&A in today's session. I want to say a huge thank you to Naomi and Richard, because I think the insights you've both shared today have been honestly invaluable, and I've really enjoyed hearing from you both. We'd also love to thank everyone for taking the time to attend today. Yeah, we really hope you found it interesting and valuable as well. If you would like more information about Magic Notes, any of our other products, or to understand more about the way that we apply AI in this sector, you can contact my colleague Alex. He's got himself a snazzy QR code, and his email address is on the screen as well if you want to reach out. I will acknowledge there's a couple of questions we didn't get to, so we'll make sure we either follow up with you guys individually or send on some general answers to questions in a follow-up afterwards. But look, thank you so much. That takes us to bang on 1 o'clock, so I can release you all to the rest of your days. But yeah, I hope you have nice afternoons, and thank you so much again.
Bye all.